So good morning, and welcome to the Golden Gate Center for Spiritual Living. I'm Reverend Mary Murray Shelton. I'm the community spiritual leader here, and very happy to see you all here this morning. If you happen to be with us for the very first time today, we want you to know that whoever you are and wherever you may be on your pathway of faith, you're welcome here. We'd like to give you a packet of information so you know a little bit more about us, and in that packet you'll find a couple of interesting things, but one of them is this blue welcome card. So I invite you to fill out the blue welcome card, take it to the membership table, which is over here in front of the kitchen. And when you turn it in over there, they're going to give you a free gift, which is this little book called Nourishing Thoughts. And it's just bite-sized bits of metaphysical wisdom for a good boost in the middle of your day. So if you ever have a day, I can remember working in retail and having a day where I actually took a break and went into the restroom and pulled out whatever I had available that had affirmations, because I was so mad and so upset at that moment that I needed something to kind of ground me and recenter me so I could go back to work peacefully. And so that's the kind of thing that can help you with. And so I encourage you to turn in your blue card over here so you can get that little book for free. And in order to get the packet so you can get that little book right now, we need for you to just do this. That's it. We won't make you stand. I've been to churches where they make you stand and talk. We're not going to do that. All I want you to do is give a wave. So if you're here for the first time, be brave, give a wave. There's a person at the back here at the back of this row, and we will bring you a packet of information. And welcome. Thank you for being with us this morning. We're delighted you're here. Hope to see you often in the future. So we are in the month of February, which is in all the centers for spiritual living about oneness and seeking the common good. Common good is hard to identify sometimes, and today I'm going to be talking about interdependence. But first, an aging man lived alone in Ireland. His only son was in Longkesh prison. And so the old fellow didn't know anybody who would spade up his garden so he could plant his potatoes. So he wrote to his son about that and received this reply from his son: "For heaven's sake, don't dig up the garden, Pa. That's where I buried the guns." At 4 a.m. the next morning, a dozen British soldiers showed up, dug up the entire garden, but they couldn't find the guns. The confused old man then wrote back to his son telling him what had happened and asking what he should do about it. And his son replied, "That's good, Pa. Now go out and plant your potatoes." So I'm not sure that manipulation is the ideal way to get our interdependence, happening, but for them, it was effective. We want to find a way to recognize that interdependence and dependence are not the same things. I think sometimes we're concerned about being interdependent because we're worried about being dependent, and we don't want to appear needy. So we're doing this balancing act, between dependence and independence, or if we really get lost in there, between codependence, which is thinking that we need somebody's love and attention so much that if we do everything for them, they won't leave us. If we do everything for them, which also includes kind of manipulating them and controlling them some to get what we need, that's codependence. Or counterdependence, which is actively avoiding any kind of intimacy or vulnerability at all. So all of those things, we are very interested in dependence in the West. We have all these different names for various shades of dependence. But what we want to get to this morning is the truth of what we are and who we are, which is, Ernest Holmes said that one with God is always a majority. Well, one with God is always who we are. But the truth is that one is all there is. And so, of course, when we're in alignment with that power, we're not really the majority because there isn't anything else. When we are one with that power, we are also one with everyone else. Sometimes when I do prayer for people who are in relationship conflicts with a boss or a family member, one of the things I want to have in my awareness and consciousness is that in spite of the appearance of separate interests, of divergent needs or perspectives or opinions, that underneath all of it, what's true and enduring is there's only one. So at the root of being, those two, or however many of them there are involved, are not separate from one another, even though it looks like it in the moment, in the appearance. Does this make sense? Are you sure? Okay. And what we need to find our way to in those conflicts is that place where our interests are not separate, because it always exists there somewhere if we can find it, or if we can trust it even if we don't yet see it, so that this balancing act doesn't get to be too onerous. You know, I think of the codependent person as the one who lets the partner sit on the grass and they run back and forth on the teeter-totter to try and keep it in balance. You know, they're doing both jobs. The counter-dependent person is the one who won't get on the teeter-totter at all. And then the rest of us are trying to balance with one another and recognize our own interdependence, which is a healthier and more real view of what's actually going on. Ernest Holmes said, "Life holds nothing against us." This is our founder, Ernest Holmes. "It desires only our good. It wants us to be well, happy, and successful, but it wants us to play the game of life the way it is supposed to be played, in unity and cooperation with others. Because," and this part is mine, not his, "because when we're not playing it in unity and cooperation with others, we are actively working against ourselves, because there's only one." So when we come back to that awareness, we recognize that in order to acknowledge and stay in balance with our interdependence, we also have to work in cooperation and harmony with one another. It's part of the whole. So, as individuals, thinking of ourselves as the independent one that pulls ourselves up by our own bootstraps and relies on no one else. But it's so interesting, the way that our bodies operate is many individualized functions of organs and tissues and cells working together to sustain the life of the whole. In the time that I'm going to read this sentence, this one sentence to you, 50,000 cells in your body have died and been replaced with new ones. While you were listening to that sentence, in 1 hour, your heart produces enough energy that is equivalent to raising nearly a ton of weight 1 yard off the ground. If you were freeze-dried, however, 10% of that body weight would be from microorganisms that are on and in your body. And most of them you wouldn't survive without. One human brain generates more electrical impulses in a single day than all of the world's telephones put together. In 1 square inch of skin, there are 4 yards of nerve fibers, 1,300 nerve cells, 100 sweat glands, 3 million cells, and 3 yards of blood vessels in a square inch of skin. And yet, every person has, yes, unique thumbprints, yes, unique iris prints, but did you know we also have unique tongue prints? Now, really, when the infinite was doing design, doesn't that just seem like something playful that happened there? I mean, why would we even require unique tongue prints, really? Really? Unique tongue prints. And yet, when we look at the universe, when we look at the planet, let's go just from the person to the planet. When we look at the planet, the structural plan of a whale's pectoral fin, a dog's leg, a bird's wing, and a human being's arm, the structural plan is exactly the same. On Earth, the most accurate census idea we have so far, conducted by Hawaii University, estimates that we have a total of 8.7 million species on this rock. 8.7 million species. And they are just like all the cells in our bodies. They have to rely on one another for survival. So we also, at the top of the food chain, rely on everything else. We are interdependent with that in order to survive. In this Milky Way galaxy, we're not even at the middle of it, by the way, and our sun is not even the largest star in it. There are 88 official galaxies in the Milky Way. 88 official galaxies. The observable universe is made up of at least 2 trillion galaxies. And our sun is just one of at least 100 billion stars in the Milky Way alone. 100 billion stars in one galaxy. And our observable universe is made up of at least 2 trillion galaxies. And you know, they very rarely crash into each other. I mean, doesn't that seem very orderly? Doesn't that seem to be operating in unity and cooperation at some level there? And so with all of this complexity, we look at that and sometimes recognize that we are a part of it. We are looking at that vastness and recognizing that we are a part of it. And looking at that vastness, we might think that we don't matter individually very much. And yet, we are one of those cells in that universe. And therefore, it needs us, or we wouldn't be here. So, even while we are many, Ernest Holmes goes on to say in Science of Mind magazine, and all the stars and planets and galaxies that we can see today make up just 4% of the universe. The other 96% is made of stuff astronomers can't see, detect, or even comprehend. 96% of our personal universe, we don't know what it is. We can't even see it. 96% of it. That's kind of a lot. So Ernest Holmes also said, we are one even while we are many. And since each one of us is a part of the whole, if we seek to destroy each other, we only ultimately hurt ourselves. This is the great lesson of life, he says. Freedom, then, will only come to such degree as we no longer do anything that hurts anyone. But that does not mean we have to become spiritual or intellectual doormats. I don't believe in that, he says. It's important for us to recognize that not only as individuals, but as groups of people, it's really important for us to recognize the value of balance and to not become doormats. Being kind and compassionate doesn't mean laying down and letting somebody walk over you again and again and again. No, firm boundaries are also part of love. We recognize that too. And part of the balance that helps teach us who we are in the world, who we are really as connected to the universe. So why does this actually matter? If everything is connected to everything else, you know, when a spider web starts to lose its strands, it's weakened. And we are all a part not only of the web that keeps this planet functioning, but we are part of the weaving, the ongoing weaving and creating and repairing of that web. So when we are in thought or action, and or at least let me speak for myself, I tend to think of it all happening, you know, right here in my head, in my experience, in my relationships, in my little circle. And then I hear that somebody received a tape of mine 20 years ago. In fact, I know a woman like this. She was a teenager in Romania cleaning houses for people, and a man from our congregation in Santa Rosa, when I was the minister there, had tapes of my Sunday talks, and he would loan them to this teenager who had a really rough life at home. And she, I guess, learned enough English. She listened to these tapes over and over and over again. I cannot tell you, it was at least 20 years later, I get an email from this woman from out of the blue who has found me in one of my things someplace, a website or something, and emailed me and said, I am going to be in Santa Rosa with my husband and I want to take you out to lunch. Now an adult in law school, married to a man who works for the Foreign Service as a rookie diplomat kind of a fellow. They now have 3 children. They've traveled all over the world, serving in all these different countries, and they're Baha'is, which is came out of the Muslim tradition. Who arranges that kind of thing? How I would never have known that anybody was going to carry a tape of mine to Romania. Now, that's one example, but for every single one of us in here, there are things that you've said to someone that have inspired them at a moment when you weren't even trying to be inspiring, and you might not know about it for 5 or 10 years, and then they say something to you, and you think, wow, I don't even remember doing that. We are needed. We are interdependent. Sometimes we are planted in a particular place, in a particular moment to be a blessing to somebody. And we don't necessarily realize that that's what's going on when we're there. We're in our own experience. I've said this before, but I want to remind you of it. I sometimes have seen people in the hospital because they're ill or they're having a needed surgery or something like that. And they're concerned that their consciousness got them into this illness or this situation where they needed to have surgery. And what happens, I watch this happen as they're in the hospital, that their family members who have been at odds with one another, coming into this situation to support this one family member, begin to make peace with one another. They begin to come into sympathetic vibration together, to recognize their love and support and value for each other. And sometimes I think there's really nothing that person needed to do any differently in consciousness. Spirit had need of them there to bring this healing into being. By their very presence here and the call going out to their family, this healing was evoked. Does this make sense what I'm saying? Can you follow what I'm saying? And so there are so many more layers of reasons behind things that happen, and the importance of us being where we are in the moment that we are there. One of the affirmations I used to use for myself, that I like to use for myself, is I'm always in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right things for all the right reasons, whether I know it or not. And that can sometimes be a comfort when it feels like that wasn't it. What just happened there, that wasn't it. So we are connected in unity and oneness. We are connected to each other all the time, everywhere. And that also means, because in this infinite that we are all one within, it also means that we continue to be connected to everything and everyone that ever was before, or everything and everyone that ever will be in the future. We're already connected to all of it. So you want to call in the wisdom of Galileo? You want to call in the humor of Richard Pryor? Whatever it is, there's something there that's available to be connected with. And we, by our thoughts and actions, are affecting not only our own lives and not only the life of our planet, but what goes out from us as vibration is carried out into the universe. And because there is that part of us which is not bound by time or space, we are also in this moment affecting all that went before us and all that has yet to come. I often think that there's no reason that we couldn't request that our highest and best future self, who certainly exists already somehow, if we could ask that one to pray for us now that we make it all the way to them in our unfoldment, that we get to live that timeline, that universe. Am I too far out there this morning, or is this okay? So it matters because as we get clarity about what part of the web we're weaving and how important our part is, it can bring forth in us a deeper compassion, a broader willingness to look past our own prejudices, our own biases, to look for those places where we need to ask again, how could I see this differently? Is it possible I am condemning this person or this group and failing to see something that is alive and whole and worthy, that is truly there, but covered up by fear or covered up by misidentification or whatever else it might be? And can I see myself clearly to understand what I'm missing somehow? One of the ministers that used to be part of our ministerial organization up in Sonoma County many years ago, Reverend Michael DeVore, he was a unity minister. And Michael started an activity because his concern was for people who were homeless. And he created an organization called SOME, S-O-M-E, which was Service, Outreach, Ministry, Education. And what he did was he took clergy out to homeless camps where they spent the night with people and talked to them. Because he felt that people that were in ministries or in various congregations or spiritual communities couldn't really understand how people got there unless they were with them and had a taste of the experience. And so what he was doing essentially was evoking a broader sense of interdependence, of how alike we are, how very easily we could trade places with people if we would only make space to recognize that we don't have to hold them out of our hearts in fear that what their experience is going to be contagious somehow, but rather with compassion for them. I told you this story once quite a while ago, but I want to say it again. Through a business group, I met a woman who is Muslim. And we were having a conversation on Sunday night when the event was over, and we'd done everything we could until our dinner was going to arrive. And we were talking about various things, and she was telling me that she had stopped for a while giving money to people who were, holding up placards outside of malls and stuff like that, saying that they didn't have work or needed food for their kids or didn't have a place to live or whatever it might be, because she was concerned that they were going to go and buy alcohol or drugs or something with it. And her husband said to her very lovingly, "That's not our business. We are here for compassion. Now, if you can't give with compassion, if you have to give with judgment, then you probably shouldn't give. But what they do with that is not up to us. The act of compassion is what's up to us." And she said, after that, I always give. I just always give. And I thought that was a beautiful recognition of that we don't know. Amanda Marshall has a song called "Everybody's Got a Story That Will Break Your Heart." Everybody. Everybody's got a story that will break your heart, a true story of their own experience. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, said, "We do not have to move the world. It is going to move anyway." This realization does not lessen our duty or our social obligation. It clarifies it. It enables us to do joyously and free from morbidity that which we should do in the social state. And then Lynn McTaggart wrote this in her book, The Bond. As the latest science demonstrates, rather than a will to dominate, the essential impulse of all life is a will to connect. Deep connection, rather than competition, is the quality most essential to human nature. The latest science shows that we were never meant to live a life of isolation and self-serving survival. We experience the greatest stress and the most serious illnesses when we are isolated from others and from a sense of connection. Now, any of us can lose our sense of connection with people whose experience we're not familiar with or don't understand. You know, even Jesus, there's a story in the Bible of the Samaritan woman. Now, Samaritans and the Israelites, the Jewish nation, they did not get along with one another. And the Samaritan woman came to him and asked for something. And his response was really racist. He said something to her like, you know, we don't give the crumbs to dogs. And she said, yes, but even dogs are allowed to be under the master's table to eat the crusts that fall there. And it was a moment for him to be called deeper into what he was there for, which was not just to serve the Jews. And he recognized it and owned that in that moment, that her faith was that huge, that she was willing to speak up and let him know that no matter what he thought of her, she still had value and could receive from what he had to give, that there was an interdependence there, she receiving the energy that he had to give, and he receiving the teaching that she had to give him, which he needed in that moment. So we don't have to be perfect. What we need to be is willing to wake up from moment to moment, willing to give waking up a chance. George Leonard and Michael Murphy wrote a book called The Life We Are Given. And in it, they said this wonderful thing. Never has there been so much scientifically based knowledge about the transformative capacities of human nature. This knowledge, combined with the lore and inspiration of the sacred traditions, gives the human race an unprecedented opportunity to make a great evolutionary advance. It is possible now, we believe, for humanity to pursue its destiny with more clarity than ever before. And it's my feeling that we need each other in order to do that. Humanity can't pursue its destiny without all of us. We are all part of that. And here's a final story about how somebody realized how much is possible when we're accomplishing it together. Charles Plum, a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, was a jet pilot in Vietnam. After 75 combat missions, his plane was destroyed by a surface-to-air missile. Plum ejected and parachuted into enemy hands. He was captured and spent 6 years in a communist Vietnamese prison. He survived the ordeal and now lectures on lessons he learned from that experience. One day when Plum and his wife were sitting in a restaurant, a man at another table came over to them and said, "You're Plum. You flew fighters in Vietnam from the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You were shot down." "How in the world did you know that?" asked Plum. "I packed your parachute," the man recalled, pumping Plum's hand, and then added, "I guess it worked." Plum assured him, "It sure did. If your chute hadn't worked, I wouldn't be standing here today." Plum couldn't sleep that night thinking about that man. I kept wondering what he might have looked like in a Navy uniform, white hat, bib in the back, bell-bottom trousers. I wonder how many times I might have seen him and not even said, "Good morning, how are you?" or anything, because you see, I was a fighter pilot and he was just a sailor. Plum thought of the many hours that sailor had spent on a long wooden table in the bowels of the ship, carefully weaving the shrouds and folding the silks of each chute, each time holding in his hands the fate of someone he didn't even know. And then Plum goes on to say, now everyone has someone who provides what they need to make it through the day. Plum points out that he needed many kinds of parachutes when his plane was shot down over enemy territory. Not only his physical parachute, his mental, emotional, and spiritual parachutes. He needed to call on all these supports before he finally reached safety. And now Plum asks his audiences very pointedly, who's packing your parachute? Really? Who is packing my parachute? Who is packing your parachute? So when we go out into the world this week, when we go out into our families, our jobs, our friends and neighborhoods, our employees, our siblings, whoever we're with, whatever we're doing, if we're in the garden, if we're with pets, they are weaving life for us, just as we are weaving life for them. And if we can remember, even once this week, to ask ourselves the question, who packed my parachute today? Who do I need to recognize I'm interdependent with? If we can remember it just once this week after we leave this room, think of the blessing that we'll be sending out into the universe. Namaste. Thank you. And let's take a moment now to move into prayer. As the practitioners surround the room, I'm going to invite you to put your hands over your heart. What is under your hands here is precious. All of these miles of blood vessels, these beating hearts, these lungs taking in millions of breaths, all these cells busily going about their work. And the deeper parts of us, the mind, the spirit, the emotions, the presence, the energy, the I amness, all of this arises out of the mystery, out of that greater than 96% of the known universe, that which is vastly more in this home of the unknown, the mystery. This is what we emerge out of. This is what we are made from. It's who we are. There is a depth, a fullness, a richness in each one of us to be known that is so much more than we have yet discovered. So we open to it together today. We welcome the depth of wisdom within this one underneath your own hands, and within this room, and within this world, and within this galaxy, this universe, and beyond. We welcome the wisdom that is available everywhere, all the time, the love, the creativity, the power, the clarity, the surrender. We let this vast love do its work in us this morning, for us and for the universe. And we're deeply grateful to know that this healing, this truth, this transformation is anchored and known and taking place in us and through us and as us right now. And not only us, but it is true everywhere, because we together think it and feel it and claim it and know it for all. Letting this word go, then, with gratitude into the creative law of mind and spirit, we just let it go and let it be. And together we say, and so it is. Yes.